Hey, Dan here. We got had an interesting day in the market today. Right off the bat, the Dow actually hit a new high, whereas the other indexes finally took a breather. So this is it's kind of a natural thing in this kind of market. It is a definite buy me market, but it's also, at least in my view, not a buy me right now market. We want to ultimately have greater participation in stocks, but it has to be at the right time. I just finished a strategy session. It was a pretty long one, where I really spent quite a bit of time coaching you guys. If you're a member, if you're not, you should be. I spent a lot of time coaching you guys on how to manage this type of thing, how to manage your emotions, how to make sure that your actions are congruent with what you know they should be, as opposed to putting yourself in a position where you're going like, damn it, I knew I shouldn't have done that. That kind of thing. So I talk a lot about that, but just generally speaking, we want to be long the market, but the question is, where from? What are we going to be doing? So I want to show you Netflix. So Netflix, okay, yeah, I got the right deal. Um, Netflix actually was, I mean, it's up almost 4% today. That's a big deal for Netflix, still in a trading range, but it's the one that actually lifted the Dow up to new highs. Like this is what the Dow's doing. It looks like, frankly, that's kind of what I would anticipate tomorrow. That's a typical thing. Spiders, the SPY, already are doing this. The same thing. I mean, the NASDAQ is in a whole nother world of trouble here. It's not at a new high, whereas the mid caps and the small caps are or were, So everything kind of pulled back today, except Nvidia. Nvidia's up. So here's the thing. Like, is it time to buy Nvidia? I'll just say, look, man, you gotta get over Nvidia. It's a great company. News flow is all around. Oh, they're done. Oh, they're just getting started. All this kind of stuff. China this, China that, and all that. But the stock's in a trading range. For you long-term investors, here's what you really need to know. The 200-day moving average is holding. Okay, that's it. It's holding. Back here, this was a shakeout that actually led to a really, really nice run. Stock goes up 40%, right? Okay, but then it ultimately came back to where it was only up 14, 15%. So this was a big move, but it retraced right to the 200. This, I think, at some point, you're going to see it retracing too. So I don't really think that this is the time for you to be buying Nvidia. Um, I I'm not interested in buying it for the simple reason that it's just drifting sideways, and I don't care really so much about what I own. What I care about is whether what I own is actually making money. And right now, unless you're just a really, really tight swing trader, and Lord knows there's plenty of liquidity here on Nvidia, but unless you're a really tight swing trader, this is not a stock that's going to make you money short term. Long term, I frankly, I don't even have an opinion on that either. I think anybody, and I mean this, I think anybody who's pounding the table on Nvidia after all this time, I kind of think they're guessing with an exclamation point as opposed to the an upward inflection at the end of their sentence. Like Nvidia's going to 300. Okay, that's a guess. Nvidia's going to 300. That's a declaration. I'm not willing to make that guess or that declaration. I think you got to just watch Nvidia and see what it's going to do. But my point, the point that I'm making here today is the market's up. You want to be long. Nvidia is an interesting company. It's an interesting stock to watch, but I'll get into a little more detail here. These are the stocks that I think you want to avoid right now. DRAM, SanDisk reported earnings. You can see where it's down. All it's doing is perpetuating this downtrend here. WDC down bigly. Again, same thing. Um, SK Hynix, you don't want any part of this. And then Seagate, you want no part of this either. So these trades, and every once in a while, I'll have somebody in my subscribers ask me about this stuff. And I look at this as it's just kind of dead money. At some point in the future, it probably won't be. But for now, um, if you're still looking at this and you're going like, wow, I know it's going to do really well. You're the high school quarterback, you're 45 or 50 years old sitting on your in your driveway on a lawn chair next to the guy next to you, both of you drinking Bud out of an ice chest, talking about the good old days back in high school. You're looking back and reveling. Okay, you don't get to, you could do that all you want on your driveway or your front porch or even in your backyard, but you don't want to be doing that with stocks, guys. Okay, these things have a long way to go before they might start moving up again. Okay, this has been a heck of a move higher. Don't just expect more and more and more from the market because ultimately it's going to disappoint you and it's not going to give you what you think you should have. Okay, so that's all I got. Again, if you're not a member, man, $7 for 14 days. I'll promise you this. You spend $7 and say, no way, I'm going to cancel. Spend the $7 and then hoodwink me. Okay. As soon as you sign up for a free trial, then go in and cancel. Okay. You're still going to get the 14 days for free. You're not even paying $7. So just do that. Like I say, just hoodwink me. I won't even know about it because I don't keep track of that stuff. But I promise you this. If you do just stick around for 14 days, you will absolutely be a better trader. I promise you that. If that's not the case, you know what? I'll give you your $7 back. Just let me know. I'll send you a personal check. All right. I'll see you guys next time.